St- Still live on planet Earth. You're listening to the Schafer House podcast. I'm here with Trevor,
Trevor, Joel, and Scott Schafer.
and we're getting grungy.
Yes. Gonna open up with a little tune from Nirvana.
Let's do it.
To lend, I do think you fit this shoe. I do want you have a clue, but I'll take advantage while you hang me out to dry. But I can see you every night free. Well, I do. I'm standing in your line, I do want you have the time, I do make it number two, I do keep a date with you, but I'll take advantage while you hang me out to dry. Well, I can see you every night free. Well, I do. With a hand to lend, I do think you fit this shoe. I do want you have a clue, but I take advantage while you hang me out to dry. If I can see you every night, I can see you every night.
That was one of my first exposures to grunge, I think, around 91 and stuff when all that was blowing up. My brother had bought the cassette tape of Bleach, and that track, definitely stuck out in my mind, so.
Yeah, that was the first CD I ever bought, actually.
Oh, really?
It was Bleach.
Nice.
Nirvana. Remember 90, I guess it was 91, 92. I'd have been 6th grade, I think. And I just remember once that video hit MTV for Smells Like Teen Spirit, it was on.
Yeah.
Like the next week, kids started wearing flannels and, Doc Martens.
Right.
Traded their basketball jerseys for.
Just took over, man.
Yeah, it was ubiquitous, like overnight.
Yeah, overnight too. And I mean, it's funny, talking about the fashion and stuff, but even, music-wise, it's like hair metal was the rage, and then overnight those guys couldn't,
Yeah, they
get
couldn't
signed or do anything, It just really changed the musical landscape so quickly.
Yeah, it was over just like that,
Yeah.
Whole new style of playing, whole new everything, really.
Right.
It just changed the game.
Yeah.
And then right after that, you had same time, I guess, 10 when Pearl Jam was released.
Right.
Just before that, maybe. Say within months of each other.
Right.
And then Bad Motorfinger, the Soundgarden.
Mm-hmm.
And those 3 albums just, took music in a whole different direction.
Yeah, within months of each other. Yeah, all those were released, and then You have Alice in Chains thrown in there too, and those are like the big four of the grunge movement.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's the big four, I would say.
Yeah, and the Seattle Sound, as it was called. You know. But what's interesting to me is, you know, this term grunge gets thrown around and stuff with these bands, but how different they all sounded. You know what I mean? And yet they're all associated with each other.
Mm.
But it's just kind of interesting. You know, I've heard different stories about how the term got used,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like definitely marketing latched onto that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Oh,
exploited
definitely.
it for all it was worth. You know?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a creation of the media, you know, because
Right.
you know, all these bands, there's a similar sound in
Mhm.
some ways, but when you get down into it, it's so completely different,
Right.
with so many different influences and styles
Yes.
thrown in there, you know, and it varied from one band to the next, you know.
Right.
So it's kind of hard. Grunge is kind of an all-encompassing term
Yes.
for Seattle at the time, but you know, all those bands could, you know, completely different. Could have been touring with other bands of, you know, completely different genres, you know.
Right. And, you know, to me, grunge is really, you know, this hybrid of punk and metal and, you know, classic or alternative rock or indie rock or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like Nirvana leaned more towards the punk side of things. Alice in Chains and Soundgarden probably more towards the metal sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pearl Jam was more like a classic rock influenced thing.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them shared common influences. You know, even though they didn't sound exactly the same, you know, they use those influences in different ways. It's like I hear a lot of, you know, Black Sabbath,
Oh, for sure.
you know, influencing that stuff. And then, you know, all the garage rock of the 60s, you know, like the Kinks or, you know,
Right. Yeah.
stuff like that. Or the Sonics were a band out of Seattle, actually, from the 60s that were a big influence on all those guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were one of the first, you know, bands and stuff to really tackle on kind of like darker subject matter in their songs. Similar to like how the Velvet Underground influenced a lot of stuff because they were addressing things, you know, during the whole hippie flower power movement.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
talking about prostitutes and heroin and, you know, all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. So, you know. And then, you know, you get into Neil Young, who is often called the godfather of grunge.
Right.
And his playing style, which was just so loose and, you know, grungy, you know.
Yeah.
It sounds grungy, so it, you know, it makes sense why he would have influenced them. And then, of course, the whole punk movement that emerged, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of those guys were influenced by that.
I mean, you definitely hear the Ramones' influence on was huge on Nirvana, I would have to say.
Totally.
And you know, even, you know, just that kind of distorted power chord style, you know,
Right.
that became one of the trademarks, I think,
Yes,
of what grunge, you know,
absolutely.
what
just-
we're calling grunge, you know.
Yeah. And the huge, you know, one thing I think all those bands shared was like this huge like wall of sound. You know, they just played with a lot of distortion and fuzz and, you know what I mean, and a lot of low end,
Yeah.
but it just created this big thick sound, you know. And really all those guys I feel emphasized, you know, energy and, you know, that kind of thing over technique
Mm-hmm.
and finesse and being flashy. And I think part of that might have been a rebellion against like hair metal. Do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think they just there was kind of a, you know, a uniform to that hair metal thing.
Right.
And although maybe you could say that became true of grunge too, with the
Yeah.
flannel and the Doc Martens.
Right.
Initially, it was just, no, this is just how we dress. You know,
Yeah.
we're not putting on a costume for this performance. We're just walking in there off the street and the clothes that we'd be wearing, you know,
Right.
and, you know, just letting it fly without any of the, you know, the pretension or the, you know, the rock star kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those guys didn't set out thinking that flannel was going to, you know, become the fashion.
No.
They were just wearing what they had.
Yeah.
Similar to, you know, punk, everyone started putting like safety pins and stuff in their clothes. But originally those guys were doing that because those were the only clothes they had and they were falling apart. And
Right.
they safety pinned it to keep it together. It wasn't a fashion statement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, eventually things always, once they get some exposure and are successful, they get milked for that kind of thing,
Yeah, for sure.
But it seems to me that in the 80s, the hair metal thing, it was like you had to play for years and years and study guitar 16 hours a day or whatever, you know what I mean, to be able to do anything. And what I liked about grunge music is, you could be playing for a short period of time and they just got out there and did it. And that was a huge influence on me as someone who, I used to listen to, Metallica and stuff like that and, whatever, Van Halen, and wish that I could play like that. But I didn't really think it was feasible. When I heard, Nirvana in particular and saw him, I was like, okay, that I could do. I feel like I could do that. And I started learning guitar and I learned their songs relatively quickly,
Yeah.
But I think the strength lies with all these bands in their songwriting.
Definitely.
They didn't have to be flashy, guitarists and, shred all over the place because their songs were just so good and they wrote guitar parts that served the song.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they brought they brought a different element to songwriting, and you kind of, although there's a lot of guitar, guitar work in bands like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, it was just a little bit different take. There wasn't that playing for the sake of playing flashy,
Right.
And just sitting there soloing for 2 minutes and just showing off all your skills and your chops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I felt the same way. Just a lot more accessible. Just it's like I don't think I could play like Eddie Van Halen, but maybe but when I saw Kurt Cobain play, or maybe even bands like the Pixies,
Oh yeah, totally.
I thought, maybe I could do this.
Right.
Yeah,
and I mean, bands like Dinosaur Jr. too.
Yeah.
That were a huge influence on that movement. He's got some chops, Start chopping.
Jay Mascis is the man. Yeah.
But his vocal style and playing style and stuff just, resonated with me because it just felt more, accessible, like you could just do it and stuff. Like he wasn't classically trained or anything,
Right.
And so...
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite bands and huge influence on me growing up. Just once I heard that, I was just like, oh, the possibilities are endless,
Yeah.
Because this guy's unconventional. His voice sounds, it's not your everyday trying to sound pretty voice. He's just singing like he sings, and then just adding these amazing guitar lines and with these amazing songs and lyrics.
Yeah.
And just letting it fly, being like, this is me.
Right,
I'm not trying to be this guitar hero or anything, but I can play with those guys if I, if I want to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lesson I think a lot of people could learn, is just because you have the technique doesn't mean you always have to showcase it.
Right.
If it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit,
Yeah.
There's time and place for everything. And I definitely could hear the influence of Neil Young and Jay Mascis playing. Sorry. So
that one's always a tongue twister.
Yeah, I mean, because Neil Young did a lot of these hammer on things with chords, and Dinosaur Jr. does that a lot with walls of distortion, of course. But I could hear those elements in there, and and then like you said, the Pixies. I think one of their biggest influences was they had this very dynamic sound.
Yeah.
A lot of dynamics, and their verses would usually be soft, and then their choruses would come in and would be, heavy and loud. And Nirvana, I know, said they were directly influenced by the Pixies and their approach to songwriting, and they utilized that and mastered it, really.
Yeah, I would say so. They, and just to show you what you can do with a 3-piece band,
right?
Too, or Neil Young's case, it's not a 3-piece band, but he's kind of, he's carrying it in a way with his guitar playing, his
Yes.
distorted guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He could be, playing in a power trio with that style.
Right.
So I think even, Pre-Dinosaur Jr., who was also a 3-piece, that's,
Yeah.
that style definitely came from Neil Young. A
Right,
good
right.
portion of it,
Yeah. And kind of mixing rhythm and lead playing together because it's just one guitarist handling, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
And that's where you get into, all the differences too, because, Nirvana was a 3-piece and stuff. Alice in Chains wasn't, but they only had one guitarist, and then Len Staley was a separate vocalist, so they were a 4-piece, but still it was just one guitarist handling everything.
Yeah, that's true.
But
That's
then
true.
Alice in Pearl Jam and Soundgarden had 2 guitarists. And I feel like Pearl Jam...
Eventually, I think Chris Cornell came in playing guitar a little bit later, so initially they kind of were doing that, because initially he's out front,
right.
in the Bad Motorfinger album, he was still kind of doing the frontman thing, and Kim Thale was doing the guitar work, and then eventually he started, playing at least live. I'm sure he'd, been playing for, years before that.
Well, because he was their main songwriter, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure he'd been playing for a while to be able to compose those songs at least,
Yeah, interesting. I just heard recently that he was a drummer. Yeah, starting out. He might have even been the original drummer of Soundgarden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I had never heard that before.
Wow. Yeah, I never heard that either. Interesting.
So, what a talented individual who will be missed. You know?
Definitely will be missed. And,
When did you first hear of what we're calling grunge now, or...
Yeah, well, I mean, my earliest memories in life pretty much are tied in with grunge. I was 3 years old when it, blew up and stuff, but I had an older brother who was old enough to, really be into all that stuff. And I remember him bringing home a cassette of Bleach, like I was talking about earlier, and listening to that. But I remember watching MTV a lot with him at that time, and that's when I saw the Smells Like Teen Spirit video. The Black Hole Sun video was one of my favorites at that age and stuff. I just thought it was such a cool video.
Great video.
Yeah. And so, I was exposed to that and stuff. I think Pearl Jam was the one that took me the longest to get into.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I don't know why at that age it just didn't click with me right away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I could remember going out and getting the CD of the Unplugged album that Nirvana did and listening to that album over and over again,
Oh, yeah.
And that definitely helped shape my playing, and it exposed me to another important band, the Meat Puppets.
Mm-hmm. Super influential on the whole grunge movement.
Right. One of my favorite bands, and they're actually from Phoenix,
That is true.
I got to jam with Kirkwood, the lead singer and guitarist of that band, his son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Elmo. I got to jam with him before, which was cool. But yeah, so that's another very important band. I think one of the first songs I ever learned was Lake of Fire. Folks go when they die. They don't go to heaven where the angels fly high. They go to a lake of fire and see them again till the 4th of July. That. Yeah. Because they were on a few of those tracks from the Unplugged album, but I think there was 3 Meat Puppet covers or something like that.
I think so. Yeah, I believe there's 3.
And I mean, what a compliment to them, to play 3 of their songs.
Right, on one of what became probably one of the greatest selling albums of all time,
right.
Nirvana Unplugged. It's such an amazing album, too.
Yeah, and I think it's just one of the best examples of, a live performance, too.
Yeah.
Me too. Just so great.
And I just loved how it illustrated how underneath the distortion and, the wild guitars that we all associate with grunge, you see it stripped down with an acoustic guitar, and you see the songwriting.
Yes.
You see the influence of the Beatles and, just some of that earlier rock and roll stuff. as
Right.
well.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, Nirvana or Kurt Cobain in particular was a huge Beatles fan, and I had heard that when he wrote about a girl, it was after he spent the entire day listening to the Meet the Beatles album or with the Beatles album.
Oh, really?
And it's like once I heard that, I could totally hear it now in that song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, come to think of it.
Yeah. But I mean, I could hear that influence in a lot of their work. You know, there's a pop element to it all. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And you know what? I have to say that I think, obviously Kurt Cobain's a extremely talented individual,
Mhm.
but I'd have to say that that's why they are the band that you think of first, probably. Maybe some people think of Pearl Jam or Soundgarden first,
Right.
but Nirvana, became, pop music essentially,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that song might have been number 1 on the Billboard charts, if
Mhm.
not, certainly up there for quite a long period of time. And
Oh, yeah.
and I think it was that pop influence that he brought that just made his songs relatable and just made it connect on a level that some of the other bands, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam had some of that too, but I think Kurt Cobain's style,
Mhm.
just some of that pop sensibility that he brought to
Right.
it, really contributed to why he'll go down as, one of the greatest of all time.
Absolutely. I mean, you listen to Nevermind and it's, it's so polished and stuff and everything just, it's catchy, and
What a great sounding record too.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing too. I would have to say that you can hear with grunge is the production kind of changed from this, although I would say it produced extremely well, but there wasn't that overproduction element of like the hair metal
Mhm.
and this a million guitars on this track. And, there's just crazy unnecessary vocals and all this stuff.
Right.
It was really heavy hitting, just really well recorded and well mixed, but just simple,
Straight to the point.
and just sonically in your face with Dave Grohl's drums. I mean,
Right.
that I think that really is what kind of started the whole thing, like those elements,
Yeah.
It
It
all
wasn't
put together.
overindulgent, at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Just all the essentials, just extremely well played, just in your face, but simple lines and simple, melodies and rhythms, but just to perfection.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I mean, I think another element too is lyrically speaking too, because they had this sound, but were definitely pop songs in the sense that they were a couple minutes long, had your typical structures and stuff, but they were speaking about things that you wouldn't hear in a pop song normally or previously. Speaking about a little bit darker topics, depression, anxiety, apathy, alienation,
Yeah.
self-loathing, whatever it may be.
Right.
And I think that connected with a lot of teenagers and people in general at that time too.
Yeah, it certainly did with me.
Right. Me as
you
well,
just
yeah.
you could just hear some relatable things
Yeah.
as opposed to, everything's perfect, just bubblegum lollipop,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just some actual like self-expression that you weren't hearing,
Right, exactly. A little bit deeper, than don't need nothing but a good time. There's a little bit more.
Just a little more substance,
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So
Yeah, so what would you say was kind of the next thing after Nirvana for you, like of those bands like that you kind of gravitated towards or that kind of caught your attention?
Alice in Chains.
Alice
for
in
sure.
Chains?
For sure. Yeah. There was something about Lane Staley's voice that, as a young kid really captivated me. Like I just never heard anything like it. And, their unique way of harmonizing too. They would have these really unique, dark sounding harmonies that I just thought were the coolest thing, And since they were a little bit more on the metal side of things,
Yeah.
they did have a little bit more flash in their guitar playing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pearl Jam as well, actually. They were more,
Definitely.
is it Stone Gossard and Mike McCready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they had a little bit more of that classic rock sense of playing.
Yeah,
So
I
they-
think so too. You could hear the blues influence on
Yeah.
some of that too.
Totally. They had a little
Yeah.
bit more of that, but they weren't being overly flashy though. They still served the song, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought they were amazing. I mean, still to this day, you know, some of the stuff they come up with, it's just between the two of them, and then Mike McCready. I mean, he's one of the all-time shredders. I mean, that
Yeah,
people don't
he's
think about.
amazing,
That
yeah.
you know, Stone Gossard, amazing player too, but you know, some of those leads that you hear, you know, that's Mike McCready just going
Right.
off. You know, just and tastefully done, not overdone.
Mhm.
Just I thought it fit their style perfectly, and a lot of their songs are a little bit longer. I would say that you
Right.
know, pushing 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and but they don't seem that way because of all the really great, you know, guitar, you know, solos and fills that they just fit in there seamlessly.
Right.
You know, it's just so a little bit different than say Nirvana or you know, some of these
Yeah.
power trios, but amazing. Just you know, slightly different style, but another amazing take on the whole thing. You know,
Right, right. And you know, but I mean the main thing is for me was Nirvana because I was able to learn and play their songs, whereas a lot of Soundgarden I wasn't really able to play because I mean odd time signatures, you know, weird things like that, or just a lot of like down tuning, for example, and things like that, which Alice in Chains did as well. Which I wasn't, you know, I was still learning how to play in standard tuning. I wasn't ready to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Just drop D.
Yeah,
or just whatever.
exactly.
Yeah,
So, you know, but I would listen to these bands and discover what influenced them. And of course, you know, Green River and Mudhoney were a big influence on this whole movement. You know, Green River is apparently credited by some people as coming up with the term grunge. Mark Arm, who later formed Mudhoney, I guess used that as a term to describe his style at some point, but didn't know it would take off like that, you know. And then the Melvins, of course, you know, were a big influence on all those guys. And, you know, all those guys kind of just had this like sludgy sound is what it sounds like to me. You know what I mean? Just real heavy. And, you know, some of those guys played out of bass amps, their guitars out of bass amps to get a lower tone. But yeah, so I loved all of that. Just those powerful, crushing riffs, but they're simple riffs. You know what I mean?
right.
So, and
Yeah,
you know, I heard Mudhoney's. Touch me, I'm sick. You know, and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, you know, which has like that dark kind of
right.
Black Sabbath influence once again, you know, those kind of sounds. And so, yeah, listening to that stuff, and I discovered, you know, Mother Love Bone and stuff like that.
Yeah, huge. One of the you know, other fathers of grunge.
Right.
Definitely have to, you know.
But they almost had like this glam rock influence
He did.
from it.
Andrew Wood from, yeah,
I mean, he was a showman, you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And I feel like, not that Kurt Cobain wasn't or anything, but there's a difference between someone like Andrew Wood that almost came from that like Freddie Mercury thing where you're just, you know, loving and relishing in the audience and the experience. And then someone like Kurt Cobain that almost seemed uncomfortable with stardom,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, definitely. There's two completely different personalities. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like Lane Staley to a certain extent was probably the same way, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Which is funny because Alice in Chains started out as a glam metal band as well.
That's
you
right.
know?
You listen to the first album, you know.
Yeah, and just early videos of them too, you know. So, and what's funny to me too is all of these bands have listed Kiss as an influence.
of course,
As a big influence, you know.
That's why I just think it's so funny is like all these categories that get created.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody forms their camps. Like, of course, as a kid, and then we like this band, but not that band because, you
Yeah.
know, but really they all were pulling from the same pool
Right.
of people. They all listen to Kiss and the Beatles and all this stuff. And whether they take it as an influence or not, it's just like you can see throughout the different bands, who they were listening to,
Right.
and the influences. And so I think it's just kind of funny, and it really just reinforces that music's music, and you should take what you like and incorporate it, and what you don't like, just leave it aside. But, that's what I just really hate, just the haters, you know what I mean? Just,
Yeah.
I hate that band, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, if you don't like it, that's great. But, just to hate it because it's some style that you're supposed to hate because you're in
Exactly.
camp A and not camp
Exactly.
B.
Well,
It's just silly to me,
I'm thinking about how many, grunge kids were probably talking shit about Kiss because
Oh,
they
yeah,
were like the epitome of a corporate rock band.
Exactly.
Not knowing that all their heroes that they're listening to loved them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they put on a great show, had a great image and stuff, but their songs, once again, were not overly technical. You know what I mean? They were just good, fun songs. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you could be playing for a little while and learn them and stuff. So, and yeah, I mean, kind of seems like, I don't know, when would you say that grunge really took off and blew up?
Took off, at least for me, what I recall. I would say I was probably in the 6th grade. So, what was that, 11, 12, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't know if I heard the song Smells Like Teen Spirit first or if I saw the video.
Right.
Because that was kind of when MTV was,
actually playing videos.
Yeah, they were definitely playing videos. But they, all of a sudden, it was ubiquitous. These kids that you would, people would call the stoner kids or whatever. Like maybe that term wasn't even established yet, but you know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden they're the biggest fucking thing on TV or on the radio. And it's this music that you wouldn't think certain people would be listening to, but not everyone, but a lot of people throughout whatever genre were appreciating it.
Yeah.
And all different types of people in it, and so I would say that was like 92.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And after that song, it was just the floodgates opened.
Right.
It was like the hair metal, and it was just gone. Like, as far as the real the popularity of it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was new hair metal bands emerging at that point.
Not
what I mean?
really, and it's interesting. And this, obviously not a grunge band, but but Metallica, it speaks to their talent and their, just their songwriting. That was kind of when one of the bands that survived that, even though they're not hair metal, they're their own thing.
Right.
They're completely a category unto themselves, and
Right.
the godfathers of so many genres.
Yeah.
But at that time, everybody was making camps.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you were into this kind of metal, it's just like you weren't in with Nirvana and and Pearl Jam and whatever, but Metallica, it seemed like you could still like Metallica and, be influenced by grunge or appreciate the grunge artist, whatever that term really means,
One of the things I love about Metallica is I feel like they adapted because of that.
They did.
Because, it was, as grunge is blowing up, they released the Black Album, which was much simpler. It had that grunge influence and song structure, which is like a simple riff. They weren't writing 10-minute progressive metal epics, anymore.
Right.
And I think and that ended up being their best, selling album and stuff. And I think that's cool for a band that was already successful to listen to what's coming out still and allow that to influence their writing. I always respect that about artists.
Yeah.
That don't just get locked into what they've been doing and stick to their formula. That
right.
They are always being influenced and inspired by what's going on around them. And I think that was definitely a case for them, and it worked to their benefit,
Oh, for sure.
And it's a great album too.
It is a great album. It's probably one of the greatest albums of all time.
Yeah.
whether you like Metallica or you don't, you can't argue with the songs on that album and the production of that album and a new take on something that, had been pretty nichey, you know what I mean?
Right.
Up until that point. So once again, the grunge influence and I don't know, the timing that might have come out just, right around the same time, 91, but you can hear, the influences back and forth between, the different camps or whatever you want to call it,
Right. And it seems like, once it came onto the scene in like 91, I mean, it thrived, through 93, 94 and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, Kurt Cobain passed away in 1994, and then, Alice in Chains, kind of took a hiatus and stuff.
Yeah.
So those bands started kind of falling away, but I don't know if that signaled the end of the grunge movement per se, or the first wave at least.
I mean, what I suppose, I don't really have a cutoff in my mind.
Right.
I can hear that influence spreading out, to the late 90s with bands like Bush and let's see, what would be another?
Well, I mean, late 90s till today, if we're speaking, I mean, I still hear the influence. But yeah, there was Bush, Fuel,
yeah.
Creed, I even
Creed,
think were
yeah,
influenced by like
absolutely.
Pearl Jam and stuff. And
Absolutely. Stone Temple Pilots,
Puddle of Mud.
a band we didn't mention, but,
Oh, yeah.
it gets lumped in with the grunge. They're not from Seattle, but,
Right.
they definitely they're similar,
Yeah.
all these bands came to be the core of what we now call alternative music.
Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And all, deserve recognition in their own right.
Right. Godsmack.
Godsmack.
They
Was
got their
another
name
one.
from Alice in Chains song.
That's right. And Alice in Chains, I really think, was kind of the bridge band between heavy metal and what became alternative music.
Absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, they went on tour. They opened up for Metallica. I was at that tour, but they canceled that gig.
Oh, man.
And speaking of another band that comes to mind now from Seattle, who got, who I guess will be called grunge, but they were filled in on the Metallica tour, Candlebox.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
Candlebox?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
They had some really great, songs, and they were kind of similar, a little bit heavier side,
Right.
but very poppy. They had some very poppy singles,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I had forgotten about them till you brought it up just now, because I was so excited to see. I think on the Metallica, I guess this tour would have been 93, 94. They were still touring off the Black album, but they were Alice in Chains was supposed to open up for him, and Suicidal Tendencies was the first band on the bill.
That's an awesome lineup.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, but so I missed Alice in Chains, the one opportunity I had to see him before Lane Staley passed.
Yeah. I know, and I missed seeing Chris Cornell. A few years ago, I was supposed to go to an Audio Slave show. And something came up, and I wasn't able to go, and that was my one chance. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I know. I never got to see Soundgarden either.
Yeah. But we have the records.
We have the records, and that it will live on for all time.
Yeah.
And I don't.
And it inspires us in the music we create as well.
Absolutely. To this, I mean. I don't even know if I'd be playing music if it wasn't for all of these artists, that this like really was, maybe our styles, could be considered a lot different now, but really the influence never left me,
Exactly.
And that had a permanent, imprint on songwriting and just tone and just the vocalists that came out of that time period are just some of the greatest of all time, you know? And so, regardless of what kind of music you play, I really think that nobody can in the industry can say those bands didn't have an influence on them somehow.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the influence may not always be obvious at first, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Like how we were talking about with Nirvana being influenced by the Beatles so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people might not initially, when they hear Nirvana, think Beatles, but once you hear those things, you could start spotting, you know what I mean? Certain things.
Yeah, right.
Just the
right.
way they structured things. And I mean, that heavy emphasis on melody, you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it's all rock and roll, you know, these are all just subcategories of rock and roll.
Right.
You know, and alternative rock, you know, or whatever. And I mean, we've composed some songs and stuff that would almost fit into that and stuff. And I believe you wrote one, At the Door, that almost kind of has a alternative rock vibe to it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
You want to
that
play
one?
it? Yeah, let's do it.
Play that one.
All right.
It's 20,000 feet, the engine's giving. And wave goodbye to the land of the living. Hold opened in the clouds as the plane came rolling down. You wanna talk about when shit gets real? Your man sitting next to me is trying to make his peace, saying, oh, father should have been a better father, please forgive me. The woman sitting across the aisle screaming, who's gonna raise my child? Oh, it's strange, staring helpless at the floor. It don't matter anymore. I wasn't thinking about the tax bill or the mortgage. I wasn't thinking about my bank account or driving around in Porsches. No, no, no. All I could think about's the way I left, the last words I said to you. I wish they'd been I love you, if it matters anymore. Because the wolf is at the door. Said, Lord, I'll start giving. But damn if you take me back to the land of the living again. But if you're gonna take me now, could you let her know somehow all the little things we were fighting about before? They don't matter anymore. I wasn't thinking about the tax bill or the mortgage. I wasn't thinking about my bank account or driving around in Porsches. No, no, no. All I could think about's the way I left, the last words I said to you. How I wish they'd been I love you, if it matters anymore. I wasn't thinking about, I wasn't thinking about, I wasn't thinking, no, 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 no. I wasn't thinking about my bank account or driving around in Porsches. No, no, no. All I could think about's the way I left, and that I hope she truth. 'Cause heaven knows that I still love you, if it matters anymore. Since that plane came down the runway, they safely opened up that cabin door. I just thought I'd let you know you're what I'm living for, and nothing else is ever gonna matter anymore. 'Cause the wolf is always at the door.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, would you say your vocal style was influenced by a lot of these guys?
For sure.
Because I could hear you know,
Yeah,
some of those influences.
absolutely. In a song like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, you know, I never grew up thinking that I could sing like that or that was, or just that style, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, we grew up playing punk rock and you're just basically yelling,
Yelling, yeah.
you know, and, you know, it wasn't that I didn't want to sing like those guys. I just,
Right.
I had no initial ability or, you know what I mean, to try to sing like that style.
Right.
And it's just funny how it kind of came back later, you know, after years of practice and trying to figure out what your voice actually is.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of naturally formed, you know what I mean, without being conscious of it. But
Right.
I know I hear those influences, and you know, I don't think that I would even be singing if it wasn't for that those guys, you know, Chris
Yeah.
Cornell especially, you know,
Right. Right.
Eddie Vedder. Not comparing myself to those guys or anything like that. Those guys are one of a kind, you know.
Right,
but just
right.
the tonality and
Yeah.
even Lane Staley, just some of the you know, just the deeper
Yeah.
influence of you know, just heartbreak or the, you know,
Right.
just that struggle, you know, like
Right.
I
Right.
I really connected with that, you know.
When it kind of, you know, for me at least, it was like, okay, it brought in the fact that you could be a baritone and have a rougher voice
Right.
and still, you know, sound good and be successful. You don't have to be this high tenor that sings pure, could do these huge long wails or anything. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
I mean, of course, Chris Cornell could
Yeah.
do it all. I mean, he could do the high screams. He could do, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
he has one of those all the time. Him and Eddie Vedder, but I would give the nod to Chris Cornell, not on a comparing her ability, but just the range is
yeah,
even
yeah, exactly.
broader,
Right.
which is one of the rare individuals I've
Yeah.
heard who can go
Have like a
all the way
4-octave range
down
or whatever.
to
Yeah.
and just, you know, the guy doesn't miss no early, you know, I haven't really saw them live too much, but you can just tell in
Yeah.
the way that he plays and approaches it, just how technically proficient he is as well.
Right.
You
And as
know?
far as I know, he was completely self-taught. I mean,
I believe
I
so.
believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody like that, I mean, although I'm sure he had instruction along the way, but that comes from a deeper place, you
Yeah.
know. I don't think that's something, I think everybody can learn and get better,
Of
but
course.
that whatever
Yeah.
tone and just the raw energy of it, I think, you know, that's the definition of soul right there.
And
You
I
know?
think that's something that all those bands share in common too. Like Kurt Cobain and Lane Staley and all those guys. I mean, their voices and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
no
I've seen
doubt.
Alice in Chains now with their new guy,
Mhm.
and he does a great job
No,
of
he's an amazing singer. but
filling in that. But there's still something missing. You know what I mean? It's like you could mimic things really well, but that guy just had that X factor. You know what I mean?
yeah, there's only so much mimicking you can do. And the new singer, I don't know his name. I mean, he's a brilliant musician, don't get me
I
wrong,
believe it's
but
William Duvall.
yeah, a brilliant musician, extremely talented, but like I said, there's just something that people have that it's their own unique spin, and no matter how hard someone tries to emulate, there's just something within the spirit of that person, I think,
Yeah.
that makes it impossible to completely duplicate, you know,
Right. Right.
and no replacing that, you know.
Yeah. I think what was cool though too is, as far as I know, all these bands got along with each other too, and there was a lot of camaraderie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They all kind of got along, and
Yeah, I know early on there was some beef between Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like Kurt Cobain kind of called out Pearl Jam and just I don't know exactly what he said, but just whether it was that maybe they were too I don't know if it was stylistically there was something
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever, but then I heard after that, Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder, connected,
things
yeah,
over,
and just
yeah.
and had a deep admiration for each other after that initial,
Okay.
a little spat or whatever it was.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But there's, so much crossover. I mean, going back to Green River, there was 2 guys from Pearl Jam in that band,
Mm-hmm.
and then Green River broke up. 2 of the guys from it formed Mudhoney, and the other 2 went on in Pearl Jam. But I believe it's Matt Cameron who has been the drummer for both Soundgarden and Pearl Jam.
Well, talk about one of the greatest, musicians of all time. He's amazing. He plays with Pearl Jam now.
Okay.
And,
I couldn't remember which one he
yeah.
played with first and which one he plays with now. So
Soundgarden initially.
Okay.
And it was Green River, and of course I don't know if he was ever in Mother Love Bone, because I know those bands combined.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, had
That's
a lot
what I
of
mean.
crossover.
So much crossover. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How could you not be influenced each other with all those amazing players in one spot with just completely original takes and different influences and all of that stuff, but just in one city, you know? I mean, I just can't imagine that amount of talent coming out of anywhere.
Right.
Can you think of another example of obviously you have, places like Nashville and Memphis and they have their rich musical history, but that's more of a, that's
those are established musical meccas that have been that way and will continue to be.
Right.
But I can't think of anything on the same level as that where it's Seattle,
I mean, other than Los Angeles, but let's call that that's an entertainment city.
That's established already.
Right.
I mean, like there's been things, like with country music, the Bakersfield sound or the Tulsa sound and stuff, but those weren't on the same level as that. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it was great stuff, but it didn't take over the world, like that did.
Nothing. Yeah, right. That's
and I mean, San Francisco, I guess in the 60s would probably be the closest thing I could think of. But it just goes to show, like, you don't necessarily have to move to one of those places, you know what I mean, to make it. Absolutely. And I think what's important, is for wherever you are, wherever, you live and play music and are listening to this from, to just get out there and do it and help each other out. That's what really does it, is having that community, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's what happened with punk in England and New York as well.
I think that's a huge part of it, just that community and all those different bands influencing each other and, like you said, helping each other out instead of just it being this hate fest of just, we got enough of that in the world. You can,
exactly.
You should go find that somewhere else if you're, looking for that.
You don't have to knock someone down just to make yourself, better.
Right. You don't need to kick over someone else's sandcastle to make your own as beautiful as you want. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I mean, you could have friendly rivalries.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of these groups have had that to some extent.
Yeah.
You look at John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and they had a rivalry of who
like
could write the best
healthy
song,
competition to that makes everyone better. I think is
Exactly.
great, and it's essential because think about just I don't know who influenced you and the people that you knew growing up playing, but there was always someone in the neighborhood who played better than
exactly.
and there always will be that plays better than everyone,
Right,
but it's
right.
like you look to that guy and you're like, or gal,
Mm-hmm.
you were like, oh, so you can do that. I want to try that. Maybe I could do that.
Right.
So without that, the fuel, I don't know, it just won't be as much progress. You know what I mean? But in a healthy way, not,
No, exactly. And, just, when I played in metal bands and stuff around and, I would always try to stay and watch the bands after we played, or come early and watch the bands before us, and tried to have enough humility to just look at, what are they doing, that I could do better, and let that stuff, help me. I'm always looking for a way to get better, you know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
And so, and just seeing that everyone has something to offer, like there's plenty of bands, like I was saying earlier, Pearl Jam didn't resonate with me initially, but I still respected them and what they were doing. And then as I grew older, I grew to appreciate them, and especially, 10. I think that's such a great album now.
Yeah, that's up there in the, if I had to name the 10 greatest albums of rock albums or of all time, that's got to be in there.
Right. Right.
Just the songs on that album alone,
Yeah.
where people, go a lifetime trying to get something that good and
Right.
that connects.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it had everything too, great rhythm section, great lead playing, great vocals, great lyrics, great production, So
yeah, it had everything.
But I mean, speaking of bands, crossing over and influencing each other, Temple of the Dog.
Of course, I remember when I heard that song. I want to say it was probably, I think that album came out in 93. It's not too long after those huge records for Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. I know that came out. Maybe it might have even come out same time, or
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
yeah, I'm not sure on the time period. I don't think it was before, but right around that same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing that video on MTV and being like, oh my God, Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder in the same band?
Yeah, yeah.
What the fuck? Like the two greatest singers at the time, and they're collaborating. How fucking cool is that?
Right.
You know, where you think, maybe they'd just be hating on each other.
Yeah,
or whatever,
exactly.
And all those guys, like, there's all that crossover with Stone Gossard and Mike McCready, and
there was a band called Mad Season too, which had some of those guys with Lane Staley on vocals.
Yeah, I know it was Mike McCready.
Can't remember the whole lineup, but yeah, I know it had.
Yeah, I remember that album too.
Yeah, it was a great album.
How cool is that though? That just all those different collaborations and crossovers. You know?
I think it's beautiful when that happens, and I always enjoy seeing when things like that happen, in this day and age.
Me too, man.
Yeah.
I think there should be more of that.
I agree. Totally agree. But why don't we play that Temple of the Dog song?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't mind stealing bread from the mouths of decadence. I can't feed on the powerless when my cup's already overfilled. But it's on the table, the fire's cooking, and the almond babies, the slaves are all working. Blood is on the table, the mouths are all choking. I'm going hungry. I don't mind stealing bread from the mouths of decadence. I can't feed on the powerless when the cup's already overfilled. But it's on the table, the fire's cooking, and the almond babies with slaves are all working. Blood is on the table, the mouths are all choking. But I'm growing hungry, I'm growing hungry, yeah. 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 I don't mind stealing bread. I don't mind. I don't mind. I don't mind stealing bread. I don't mind. I don't mind. But I'm growing hungry. Growing hungry. Yeah. I'm growing hungry. I'm growing hungry. Yeah. I'm growing hungry, I'm growing hungry, yeah.
Yeah, so you could definitely, you know, just see the influence between, you know, all those people to form a song like that.
Right.
You know, I think Chris Cornell maybe, I don't know, I think he wrote that song,
Okay.
but you could see, you know, you could see the influence is
Yeah.
crossing over, you know,
Right.
and became its own thing, which is another incredible band, Temple of the Dog,
Mhm.
that, you know, I wish, you know, would have done more.
They only
did
released one
record.
album, right?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I
as
could
far
be
as I
wrong
know,
about
yeah.
that, but what a great album. Say Hello to Heaven, you know, another amazing song off that record. There's a bunch of them, but yeah, that just blew me away when I heard that song for the first time.
Well, and I think, you know, that's how you could get the best music, you know? You get all these talented people together and they're having fun, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing what they're doing and enjoying themselves and not worried about, oh, Soundgarden is selling more than Pearl Jam is or vice versa or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I do.
it's about the music and nothing better than just getting together and jamming out.
Yeah, I mean, how cool is that? You
Yeah.
know, to be in two bands there.
Exactly. Like,
You know, I'm just happy to have one. You know,
Yeah.
or just imagine being able to dip your toes into all those different waters, and
right.
then you have Audio Slave after that with
Mhm.
you know,
With the guys from Rage.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you will be missed, my friend.
Yes, you will.
One of a kind.
And I almost forgot about, you know, you have Hole and the Smashing Pumpkins, too.
That's true. They get
Early on, the Smashing Pumpkins, you know, were labeled something as like, oh, the next Nirvana or something like that, or the next new grunge thing.
right. Well, I think that's kind of why that label alternative came about, because
Right.
you had all these bands that, you know, weren't from Seattle,
Yeah.
but obviously you hear and, you know, see the influence on, you know, Smashing Pumpkins have been around as long as any of them. I mean,
Right,
they've been doing it forever, but, you know, all of a sudden they come out of Chicago and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, where do we fit these guys? They're similar,
Yeah.
you know, but, you know, not quite pop, not metal, not, you know, with the indie rock influence.
Yeah,
It's just so, you know, they had to have another label to categorize it all to sell records, you know,
Right,
so alternative music and Hole from Los Angeles and Dinosaur Jr. from Massachusetts,
right,
you know.
right.
It's just, you know, it's really amazing how many great bands came out of that. And then you have Bush, like you said, gets lumped into that, you know, definitely similar sound, you know, from England, but, you know.
And I mean, they came about a little bit later on, didn't they?
I want to say that first Bush record was like 95, I want to say. And I don't know how long they were doing it before then, but
right.
Yeah, is it 16 Stone or 15 Stone?
No, I think it was
16 Stone. Yeah, I remember that coming out just kind of after that. And don't let me forget Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, another band that gets,
love them.
Amazing band.
Yeah.
You know, huge influence on me as well.
Right. Yeah. Me too. You know. I thought Bush just came out like shortly after. You know what I mean? Like within.
I think
a couple
so.
of years of 91 or whatever. Because I
think 95 is when I remember hearing him. Maybe 94.
Yeah, 90. No earlier than 94 for me. I know that, but I do remember probably when I was about 5 or 6, seeing them perform on MTV, like live or something like that. And he almost got electrocuted because it was raining or something like that while he was playing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's another early memory I have. Yeah, and you know, I loved that song, Machine Head, when it came out, and I was pretty young. Come Down, though, that's a great song.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites from that era.
Yeah, I mean, you know it, right?
I think so.
All right, I'll follow your lead.
All right.
Love and hate, get it wrong. Cut me right back down to size. Sleep the day, let it fade. Who's there to take your place? No one knows, never will. Mostly me, mostly you. Do you say, do you do? When it all comes down, 'cause I don't want to come back down from this cloud. It's taken me all this time to find out what I need. Well, I don't want to come back down from this cloud. It's taken me all this time. There is no blame, only shame. When you beg, you just complain. The more I come, the more I try. All police are paranoid, so am I. So's the future, so are you. To be the creature, do you say, what do you do? When it all comes down, 'cause I don't want to come back down from this cloud. It's taken me all this time to find out what I need. Well, I don't want to come back down from this cloud. It's taken me all this time. Why did you, why did you, why did you, why did you, why did you? Why did you, why did you, why did you, why did you, why did you? 'Cause I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. From this cloud, from this cloud, from this cloud. From this cloud, from this cloud, from this cloud.
Yeah,
Solo on that one.
Thank
man.
you. It's fun to jam off that.
Yeah, I just like that song. I was never a huge Bush guy, but I always appreciated them, and I really love that song.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few of theirs that are, gems for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's what I was trying to think. Were they kind of part of the initial movement, or were they one of those post-grunge things?
I don't know if you'd call it what you'd call it, but it was
Yeah.
definitely. I don't know how long they'd been doing it for, but when I had heard of them, I think Kurt Cobain had already died, or it was right around that
Yeah.
same time. But I'd have to check the facts on that one, but for sure. But
Because that was a movement in itself, too, was called post-grunge now. And that's when you get into a lot of those bands we were talking about earlier, like Creed and,
Creed, yeah.
Nickelback and Puddle of Mud and, Godsmack. And, I mean, so you could still hear the influences of all these artists, today
Yeah.
even.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's pervasive. It's never. I don't think it'll ever go away. I really think it's probably the last, at least rock.
Yeah.
I don't know if you call it a movement, but a category of music.
Yeah.
That there will probably ever be. You
Right.
know. Wouldn't you say? We're including alternative. I'm calling alternative, but grunge. In there, of course, with the the initial jolt. But I don't think there'll ever be that one kind of scene or what we're calling a style, maybe.
Right. I mean, I saw attempts at it later on
Marketing,
in my life.
yeah, it's just
like
all
in
the
the early
marketing,
2000s, there was this garage rock revival type thing, and they called it the Attack of the bands, and that's when the Hives, the White Stripes, the Strokes, the Vines came out, and I was all about that. I loved all those guys, but none of them sounded similar. It wasn't a big movement.
They
in
weren't
the
all from
same
one
way.
place.
Yeah, they weren't all from one place, and it wasn't as like everywhere you looked, you know what I mean? People were listening to that stuff. It wasn't like that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I definitely latched on to that because I love guitar-based music. I love rock, you know what I mean? And
Me too, man.
so I loved all those bands, and that was around the time I was picking up guitar, so that was a big influence on me too.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say, that was the last big rock movement that I have witnessed in my lifetime. I mean, there's been a few things with metal and stuff like that have happened.
For sure.
Like when, Korn and System of a Down and all that kind of stuff.
That's true.
But that's, I don't know.
But I don't know if there was. Yeah, but I still consider that.
That's a form of rock and roll to me.
But I would agree with that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
definitely the media in trying to sell records. Yeah.
But those
there was
bands were all
different
influenced by
stylistically, for
grunge
sure.
too,
Oh,
or
of
a lot
course,
them were,
of course.
Korn and
Yeah, Korn and let's see, who else? Incubus. I would put in that category.
yeah, totally.
What's another one? So when I had one on the top of my tip of my
I feel
tongue
like
that I was
there's one
trying
that
to
I'm
think.
missing.
Not three. I was gonna say 311, but that's a little bit different. But they had a little bit of that DJ stuff mixed in there too.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm missing someone.
Me too. Me too.
But maybe it'll come to me.
Yeah, maybe it'll come.
Yeah, Korn. Yeah. But then you even have, bands like Rage Against the Machine that
Right.
come out, it's 92, 93, same thing, but you can see the influence, the crossover influence in this thing that became alternative music, spawning such bands as, Korn and, I would say Slipknot and all of those kind of what we're calling new metal.
Yeah.
God, like you said, even Godsmack would kind of be in there maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
Yeah, but all came out in 92, 91, 92, 93, you know?
And once again, the influence could be there, and there's so many different ways it could be an influence. So it's like a band may not sound exactly like that, but they took a cue from their lyric writing, for example, and address darker elements or anti-establishment lyrics, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think there was a sense of rebellion with that movement.
Definitely.
And, I think that could inspire a lot of people. Rage Against the Machine, if you're not thinking of them as a grunge band, well, they shared that thing, the anti-establishment, you know what I mean?
Right.
And power to the people type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And, blue collar is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a very posh, nose in the air, you know what I mean, movement type thing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I was working people's, music and.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just funny how many, great bands we're just naming that have come out of there. And I'm sure there's a million great bands out there now too, but the marketing and the packaging of it was also part of it too, to, MTV was still playing music, which was huge influence, I mean, that really, without that, there wouldn't be grunge and alternative music,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's, I don't know if it'll ever be that way again. As much great music as there is out there these days, it's funny to look back on a time period and be able to it's a real time capsule to me.
Right. And it was definitely a special time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And a lot of great music coming out of that time. Hip hop, just amazing hip hop coming out at that time. And, there was a lot of good metal and,
and the collaboration between those two things too, rap and hip hop getting fused in with metal and stuff too.
Yeah.
Which nowadays is all over the place. You know what I mean? But
yeah, because you had bands like or Ice-T doing Body Count.
Exactly.
Obviously Rage, and then there was
the collaboration between Anthrax and Public Enemy, and earlier than that, Aerosmith and Run DMC,
Yeah, a great band that came out of that era was called Downset. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
No.
They were definitely rap heavy metal, but
Downside?
Downset.
Downset. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
On the Rage tip, definitely influenced, but those guys were great,
Yeah. And then Chili Peppers and Faith No More kind of incorporated rapping with their stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't let, things limit you. If you like something, take what you like from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And say you like it, and don't be afraid to say that you like it either.
Exactly.
If, that's,
When I was in high school and stuff, a lot of people looked kind of down on me for digging stuff like Nirvana and all that stuff, because they were all these metal kids, and things move in cycles. And so at that time, it was almost like the hair metal scene again, where it was all about shredding and super technical, playing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, I was just like, hey, I like a lot of those bands too, but I also like this, you know what I mean?
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly, yeah. So don't let anything limit you, and get out there and play and meet people, collaborate, share ideas,
That's the name of the game. Just other bands that come to mind, not on the grunge tip, but that would form what we're calling alternative music. You mentioned Chili Peppers, obviously huge. Jane's Addiction, but 9 Inch Nails.
Oh yeah,
and the bands like Ministry.
Yeah,
just what you would call at that time they were calling industrial music, but definitely used a lot of metal rhythms with. So all of this stuff kind of crossed over. You know what I mean? everybody came from different places, but you could see the rub that everybody was giving each
Right.
other, and it was just a great time to hear all those different styles, and you could go to a festival like Lollapalooza and see them all on the same bill,
Such variety in
Such
one
variety.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I miss that spirit of it, and I think people, just need to be open and collaborate, and
Yeah.
not fence themselves off to this is what I play and fuck these guys because they, you don't have to like everything,
Of course not. Yeah.
like what you like, but it's just
But try to be open-minded,
Yeah.
because you never know.
it's only going to benefit you in the long run to hear a different style or be like, how is that guy or girl doing that,
Yeah,
what
exactly.
is it that maybe I could add to my playing by learning from watching them or listening to them,
Right. Right.
because I think you listen to some of the best all around musicians, they have such diverse influences, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you wouldn't necessarily think that at the beginning,
Yeah.
but it's, the great players, the great writers, they're taking from everywhere, and that's I think what makes them great, you know what I mean?
I agree. And they continue to grow too. They don't just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, continue to evolve.
Right. You look at someone like David Bowie or something, and he
Yeah,
was
perfect
constantly,
example.
up until his death, even another person that will be greatly missed.
Absolutely, and a huge influence on grunge and alternative music. Maybe you
Right.
don't hear it right away in the style,
Right.
in the tone of his songs, but just his innovation and his just the art of it. You know what I mean? Huge influence on. I'm sure if you ask any of those guys from the Seattle scene back in the day,
Yeah. I think
huge.
particularly his album Man Who Sold the World was a big influence on grunge and stuff. I mean, that was one of his early records, but it was very heavy and dark and great album. But so listen to every kind of music and stuff, and that's where you're gonna find your little those unique things that those bands had that made them different. They were all listening to similar things, but they were also probably listening to different things too. And
Yeah,
you know
for
what
sure.
I mean? And that melting pot is that's how you create your own unique sound. You don't just pull it out of thin air. You take from, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
What has been before and, mish it all together and find your sound that way. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So,
That's the way to do it, man. Just so many. Yeah, just so many great players, so many fallen heroes. You mentioned David Bowie, and obviously Chris Cornell and Lane Staley. I think
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain, of course. But I think,
And Andrew Wood from...
Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone.
It's crazy how many of these guys just died so young, but the impact that they made within their life, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's gonna live forever.
That's the beauty of music. Yeah, it makes you immortal in a way.
Yeah, it's just great songwriters. Just I would have wondered what Alice in Chains would have done had Lane Staley lived. Obviously, Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. That what would these guys have done had they gone on?
I know. I think about that.
Just what kind of great stuff they would have if they'd continued to make music. What they could have done. You know.
Yeah, and with the technology that exists today and stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What new things they would explore.
Because look at what Dave Grohl did after Nirvana.
Right.
Of course, we got to give props to the Foo Fighters
Yeah.
who continue on the alternative, whatever you want to call
For
that
sure.
genre. I think they're
one of the
they're the
bands keeping
forefront-
rock alive today.
Yeah, they are. They're probably one of the only ones I would say from
from that period that is still going and keeping it alive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just great stuff, and all the talent in that one band.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. So, but he just continues to evolve.
Right.
So.
But it's just interesting. So you never know which city might blow up and get put on the map. It could be your very own.
That's right.
So just keep doing what you're doing, and don't let things like, if I didn't live in this town, hold you back,
Yeah.
So,
Because it can come from anywhere,
exactly. All right.
not just Seattle.
Well, I think, that probably concludes
Yeah,
this segment.
I think so. Should we take it out with something from one of the fallen heroes?
Let's do it, man.
All right, this is one of my favorites.
Mine as well.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Chase misprinted lies. We face the path of time. Yet I fight. Yet I fight this battle all alone. No one to cry to, no place to call home. Gift of self is raped. My privacy is raped. And yet I find, and yet I find repeating in my head. I can't be my own. I feel better dead. Ooh.
Não montes.
Schafer Haus.